Back 20 minutes after 2 o'clock. This is Today on eNCA. Criminals are making the most of the rolling blackouts, don't we know it, to commit more of their crimes. Much easier in the dark, isn't it? Also much easier when you have an app to tell you exactly when the power is off. You couldn't have asked for an easier way to steal if you tried. Now, experts have shared their opinion on the security threats posed by these power cuts. Luckily, we have experts to help me understand this landscape. Gareth Newman from the Institute for Security Studies joining us. Hello, Gareth. Good to have you with us from ISS as well. So when we talk about experts sharing their opinions, what comes out top of mind for you?
Well, I think that word opinion is exactly what it is. There have been no detailed studies that we're aware of which proves that there is a correlation between load shedding and crime. However, there's a lot of anecdotal evidence from different parts of the country. And just to be clear, it's not that all crime will increase during load shedding in all places. There are certain kinds of crimes that, because of where they take place or the nature of the crime, are more likely to increase in some places than in other places. We know, for example, that, with cash in transit heists, load shedding seems to have absolutely no impact on whether those gangs who commit those crimes do that or not. But we do know from some data from insurance companies that, or at least some insurance companies, that there appears to have been some increase in house burglaries and house robberies in some areas during load shedding hours, particularly on weekends. And there's a lot of anecdotal evidence because, of course, in those wealthier areas where people rely on electricity to keep the electric fences going, alarm systems, gates and so forth, if they don't have adequate backup electricity, that might leave them more vulnerable. In some places, you might find that there is an increase in street robberies. Most of these crimes usually take place when it's dark, in the evenings or early mornings, targeting people walking from taxi ranks to places of work or to city centers, and areas that might have street lights that suddenly don't have because of load shedding will become more vulnerable to those people walking there. So right now we don't have a study on that, but we do have indication that certain kinds of crimes go up, such as cable theft. We know from municipalities that there seems to be an increase in cable theft during load shedding because the cables are not active with electricity, and therefore criminals make use of that.
I suppose the problem is, and I said it in our introduction as well, Gareth, is that the issue is you've got some very clever apps which all make our lives much easier, of course, so we can all plan our lives and our routes home. But the problem is, and tell me if you agree, it's easy for criminals to figure out, especially late at night when the power is going to be off, to steal these cables that you're talking about. So opinions aside, what would you suggest then could be a way to try and mitigate this, to handle it? If someone was saying to you, Gareth, I've seen you on TV before talking about this, how do I protect myself? How do I protect my property?
I think it's important to understand that the criminal networks and groups that are involved in house burglaries and house robberies, where they do this as a primary way of making a living, will spend some time in neighborhoods looking at potential targets, looking at various houses, looking at the overall security systems, private security, police patrols, that kind of thing. They don't just randomly walk into houses. Of course, there are the opportunistic thefts that happen in some places, and it happens. So they may use the app to look at the load shedding schedule for a particular area and then use that to commit the crime at night when it's dark. But they would have to be quite sure themselves that there weren't backup systems. For example, internal batteries that were keeping alarm systems running in CCTV cameras and so forth. So I think it's not as simple as to think that criminals will simply get hold of the app and decide, right, in this area, because those areas are quite large. They're usually ward levels, and in particular in areas that do experience high levels of burglary or robbery, there are lots and lots of houses in those areas. And so it might be one factor that such criminal networks use, but I don't think it'd be the only thing. And of course, it's the best thing to do in terms of home security is to have backup batteries or systems to ensure that you have lighting, that your usual security system continues to work, belong to what neighborhood WhatsApp groups so you can share information and that kind of thing. There's nothing that's really going to solve the problem easy and quickly as a result of load shedding.
I suppose what's really of particular interest beyond the potential damage to property, Gareth, is the personal safety. And you touched on that a moment ago with those who are pedestrians in the evening, early mornings, having to walk somewhere, maybe to catch a bus or to catch a taxi as well, because they're carrying their phones on them, they're carrying wallets on them. No power, no cameras, they're easy targets, aren't they?
Yes, and but this has been a problem, for a long time. This has not suddenly emerged due to load shedding. We've seen quite a large increase in armed robberies or robberies from about 2012. There's been quite a substantial increase, over a 40% increase in the numbers reported to the police. We know that robberies in public places, such as the street robberies that you've just mentioned, or robberies taking place in parks, people walking across parks and things, are very underreported. A vast majority of the victims do not report those crimes to the police because they don't think the police will take them very seriously. But I think in certain areas, as I said, if there was a route that people used to go from a taxi rank or bus station that is usually lit early in the morning or in the evenings, and suddenly it's not lit, then that becomes an area of particular vulnerability. So I think for ordinary people who walk, use public transport, they might need to take into consideration that if they're walking in an area that doesn't have a lot of people around and the lighting is not there, that they need to be extra vigilant.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems like obvious advice, but I think if you haven't given it much thought, it might not be as clear to you as now that Gareth Newman has explained it. Maybe it might be time to start walking in groups or trying to change your route if possible, or some other mitigation, because load shedding and power cuts aren't going anywhere. Gareth, always good to speak to you. I appreciate it. As he says, though, right now you'd think there'd be a lot more concrete data, some very good opinions, of course, but no concrete data. We see some numbers regarding burglaries at home, etc. But right now, all we have to rely on is experts like ISS to give us a real idea of what it looks like on the ground. All right.